Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamaham Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we are continuing with chapter 6, which is titled Meditation Yoga or Dhyana Yoga. The place where we stopped last time is where Krishna has finished delineating the process of Ashtanga Yoga, and we also summarized the 8 limbs of the Ashtanga Yoga process, and then Krishna went into more details where there are different internal as well as external conditions to be adjusted. And the final state of the Ashtanga Yoga is captured in this verses 19 through 23, where it is stated that in the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. So restraining mental activities is a central point of this particular yoga practice, and for that matter, any yoga practice. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. And what are the overall experiences looking like at that state? That in that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. So this was the culmination point of Krishna's description of the Ashtanga Yoga process. And one point that you can notice that in this 20th verse, that yatra uparamate chittam niruddham yoga sevaya. This pretty much matches the definition of yoga given by Patanjali Muni, that yoga chitta vritti nirodha. You can see chitta niruddham yoga sevaya. So in other words, Patanjali Muni, whatever he is presenting, is perfectly aligned with the Ashtanga yoga process that is described by Krishna. As I mentioned, I have a separate presentation where I generally show side by side how the Yoga Sutras flow and how the Bhagavad Gita 6th chapter flows. And you will see a vast amount of similarity in the description of the internal and the external settings. In any case, we are going to now move forward from here, talking about the tips for success as Krishna presents, 24th verse through 26th verse. So 24, 25, 26, Krishna talks about the strategies to purify the mind and how one can actually achieve success in the Ashtanga Yoga process. So Krishna is describing the Sanishchayana Yoktavya Yogo Anirvinna Chetasa Sankalpa Prabhavan Kamans Tyaktva Sarvan Asheshataha Manasya Eva Indriya Gramam Viniyamya Samantataha. So there are 3 basic points that Krishna mentions here. The first is that yoga, in this particular case, we are talking about the Ashtanga Yoga. because that's the context here, that this Ashtanga Yoga must be practiced with Nishchayana. Nishchayana means with determination. And Anirvinna. So this is signifying Nirvinna Chetasa. So Anirvinna Chetasa means without getting any deviation from the single pointed. And we saw what is that that single pointed focus for an Ashtanga yogi. There are two things that was mentioned by Krishna. One is Atma Shuddhe. The focus goes to purifying the mind. That's one of the goals. And second goal that Krishna stated is that one should be looking for ultimately pleasure of the Supreme Lord. So you see that appears, just to make sure that we are connecting the dots here. Yeah. So Yukta Asita Matpara, that appears in the 14th verse. Okay. So Atma Shuddha and Yukta Asita Matpara, which means that making me, so Matparaha, so Krishna as the goal. So this is what we can understand in the context of that, what does without deviation means, which means that we should not deviate from the purpose behind this process. Otherwise, what's the point? Because we can see that in the Ashtanga Yoga process that is generally taught in the yoga society, it typically does not touch the spirit of these two important goals that were stated in the description here. But here Krishna is again pointing out as the tips for success that one should practice this yoga with determination and without deviation. And secondly, again there is a reiteration of the purpose behind, like in the sense that ultimately one should try to abandon all material desires which are born of mental speculation. If you remember that this chapter started with Krishna talking about Sarva Sankalpa Sannyasi. So Sarva Sankalpa Sannyasi means one who is able to give up all desires for sense gratification. That is the central sort of point of any yogic practice. So during the time of yogic practice, what is going on, like in the as a part of the mental control? As a part of the mental control is that one is able to abandon all material desires. Tyaktva sarvan. You see this sarvan. Asheshataha. Asheshataha means almost like you can say unlimitedly, or either say unlimitedly or completely, without limits, without bounds. So one is able to check all kinds of desires, tyaktva. It's a very, very strenuous process. You can see that. And after all, how one is able to do that? Viniyamya. Viniyamya what? Manasa eva indriya gramam. That this is a very significant phrase here. Manasa eva. So one is having victory over the senses with the help of the controlled mind. So this is the controlled mind where one is devoid of any desires for sense gratification. So with that controlled mind, so one is controlling the senses. So Viniyamya is referring to the controlling of the senses. So manasa eva indriya gramam. Indriya gramam means all the senses one is able to control. So this is the sort of, you can say, how an Ashtanga yogi is supposed to practice in order to achieve success. We had a discussion here. Okay. Second tip. So we saw in the previous one, the focus went to how using the controlled mind, one is controlling the senses. Here, Krishna is talking about gradually, step by step. So, shanay shanay uparamed buddhya dhriti grahiteya atma sanstham manaha kritva na kinchidapi chintayat. So this is now taking one step above. So how is one controlling the mind? So one is controlling the senses with the help of the mind. And how is one controlling the mind itself? So it is with the help of the intelligence. So shanai means gradually, step by step. One should become fixed by means of the intelligence. Now, this is very significant. The buddhi, this element of buddhi, is is brought about later as well, because buddhi is where the real discrimination power comes from. So discrimination power comes from buddhi, and because of the proper discrimination power, one is able to have controlled mind. And when there is controlled mind, then there is controlled senses. So Shanai Shanai Upare mein Buddhya means with the help of intelligence. Dhriti Grahitaya. Dhriti Grahitaya means one is now carried by that conviction that we spoke about in the previous verse, that determination and conviction. So Dhriti Grahitaya. Grahitaya means one is able to be fixed. In what? Atma Sanstham. Atma Sanstham means to be fixed in the self. So mind in this way becomes fixed in the self. Atma Sanstham. Manaha Kritva. So mind, so Manaha means mind, Atma Sanstham. And in this way, one is fixing one's mind with the help of the intelligence, and na kinchidapi chintayat, and nothing else one should think about. So gradually, step by step, become fixed by means of intelligence, sustained by the full conviction. Mind should be fixed in self alone and nothing else. Atma Sanstham Mana Kritva. Na kinchidapi chintayat, nothing else. So this is the second important tip. So first tip was using the controlled mind, one is controlling the senses, and therefore one is devoid of any desire for sense gratification, moving ahead with the Ashtanga Yoga process with determination. Second tip here is that with the help of intelligence, one is able to remain in that fixed position where the mind is fully controlled. And here is an excellent tip that is coming for success, which can not only be applied to the process of Ashtanga Yoga, but also to Bhakti Yoga. And this is something that we oftentimes quote as one of the points of practical application when we are chanting our Hare Krishna Mahamantra and we want to bring our mind to be focused on hearing the sacred sound. So yato yato nischalati manas chanchalam asthiram tatastato niyamya etat atmaniyeva vasham nayat. So this is very important. So what happens is that when we practice meditation, it doesn't matter what could be the shape and form of meditation. I mean, in this case, Krishna again is talking about Ashtanga Yoga process, but any meditation for that matter, as soon as we try to bring our mind to focus on an object, the mind tends to wander, because mind is by nature flickering, and we will see the characteristics of the mind coming up very soon. So mind will tend to wander, and that's one of the reasons why we recommend that you practice meditation in at the beginning point of your day rather than middle of the day or end of the day, because by the time you approach the middle of the day, the mind has been already filled with so many ideas, so many experiences that we have already been through, and they are going to clobber the mind as we are actually going to focus on the object. It will drift towards the different types of interactions we may have had. It will drift towards different kinds of scenes, different kind of objects that we have seen throughout the day. And this way, mind gets a lot of subjects to wander into. But if it's in the morning, early morning hours, we have not yet begun our day, there is less opportunity for the mind to wander. But of course, like, mind has a tendency to wander, and therefore it will find some excuse to wander into an object apart from what the object we want to make it a focus of. So so Krishna is giving a tip here, that when you are finding your mind wandering, the first thing is that you have to detect that while practicing the meditation. How are you able to detect it? You're able to, the very fact that you're able to detect it, that means that you are not your mind. You are your eternal self or the spirit soul, and by virtue of your being a spirit soul, you're able to see that you're separate from the mind, and the mind is the one which is kind of getting carried away into some object, and you detect it. And as soon as you detect it, what do you do? Tatastato niyamya etat atmani eva vasham nayat. You bring that mind under the control of the self. So recognize that your position is much higher than the mind. Your position as a spirit soul, as a part and parcel of God, you have tremendous amount of power. It's just that you have forgotten to exercise that power. So when you recognize the mind has wandered, you recognize and bring the mind back to the object of your meditation. And that is an excellent formula that Krishna gives. In other words, when we are practicing meditation, we should not lose hope. We should understand that I am actually much more powerful than I think. And therefore, mind can be brought under the control. So in this way, Krishna gives a very important sort of tip for success. So the three tip, if you want to see now in sequence, so using the controlled mind, control the senses. Using the intelligence, control the mind, and using the self, because self is on the highest platform, and therefore whenever you see mind is deviating, you bring it under the control of the self. Okay, so now what is the realization of a successful Ashtanga yogi? How is the experience looking like? Now this section is very, very interesting because the way Krishna lays down the goal or lays down the experience of a successful Ashtanga yogi, because it is a little bit enigmatic in the way it progresses. So first, Krishna talks about the how the internal experience looks like. So first of all, every verse, as I was telling last time also, every verse has the mention of the mind in the overall description. The mind, you can see, is really, really the key to achieve success. So prashanta manasam. So what happens for a successful yogi? The mind becomes pacified. Prashanta manasam. Hi enam yoginam sukham uttamam. And when the mind is pacified, then one is experiencing sukham uttamam. One is experiencing the highest perfection of happiness. And what is the characterization of the highest perfection of happiness? Shanta rajasam, which means that it is free from passion. Free from passion. And in that state, Brahma-Bhutah akalmasham. In that state, one achieves the platform of Brahman, or one realizes one's qualitative oneness with the absolute. In other words, one recognizes that one is after all actually spiritual being. One is not a product of matter. So one gets that realization. So the yogi experiences freedom from all internal contamination, and these are the two characteristics of that, and that is what is expressed by akalmasham. So freedom from all internal contamination. So one is experiencing highest perfection of happiness, which is free from passion, and one is experiencing this state of Brahma-Bhutah. And if you remember, like last time, we mentioned how the fifth chapter, the goal of Nishkam Karma Yogi also has been identified to be this platform of Brahman, where one is experiencing um, the, the stage of contacting the Brahman feature of the absolute truth, and which we know that that the three stages in which the absolute truth gets realized is Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So it goes through the stages. Like the Brahman is the lowest stage of transcendental realization, and then when that grows further, that becomes Paramatma, and then when it grows further, that becomes Bhagavan. So this Brahman state is where one experiences once once being a spiritual being, or one realizes that I'm spiritual, or I'm simply a part of the energy of the Supreme Lord. So energy of the Supreme. So this is the state that one gets in touch with. Now, this verse is very similar, very similar to the verse that is there in the 18th chapter, toward the end of the Bhagavad Gita, and that is Brahma-Bhutah. So there, that same term comes, Brahma-Bhutah. The Brahma-Bhutah, prasannatma na shochati na kamshati, samaha sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labhate param. So in that particular verse, Krishna also summarizes in a similar way that when one reaches this qualitative state of oneness with the energetic manifestation of the Supreme Lord, then what happens is that one realizes that there is actually nothing to be affected by in this material world, and therefore mind is very peaceful. So there also Brahma-Bhuta Prasannatma, and therefore there is an internal joy. So again, characterized by the highest perfection of happiness. So there Krishna describes this idea of being free from passion. What does that mean? So being free from passion means that one is free from hankering. And there Krishna says that one is free from both hankering and lamentation. That na shochati, na kankshati. So passion means there is like going to be a strong desire in the heart to enjoy. So whatever we don't have, we will look for those objects. So free from passion means we would be not hankering after those things that we don't have. And free from ignorance typically means that one would not lament about things which just we used to possess but we do not have anymore. So in other words, one is not looking forward to material enjoyment, and one is not missing out on material enjoyment, and therefore one is happy. So this you can also understand to be that one generally has a tendency to either project into the future, which is the characteristic of passion, or dwell in the past, which is the characteristic of mode of ignorance. So in other words, one is neither projecting oneself into the future nor dwelling in the past, but one is more present. And we can understand that right now I have the opportunity to connect with the transcendence, and therefore the source of my happiness right now is meant to be searched after in the present, rather than being in that hankering and lamentation mode. And that's the explanation of this Brahma-Bhuta stage. And that continues that, okay, so why am I describing this? Because in the 27th verse, Prabhupada sort of translates, just keeping that 18.55, which is going to come much later, in mind. And therefore, Prabhupada is saying that the yogi whose mind is fixed on me. So in this particular verse, there is no direct relationship with fixing the mind on me, but that enigma becomes clarified either on the basis of 18.55 or on the basis of just a few verses down. We will figure out why Prabhupada explained here that the yogi whose mind is fixed on me, although there is no reference to me in this particular verse, in the 27th verse. So then Krishna is saying in the 28th verse that Yunjan evam sadatmanam yogi vigata kalmasha. So again, vigata kalmasha and akalmasha is the same thing. Sukhena brahma sansparsham atyamtam sukham ashnata. See here the focus, the 28th verse just zoomed into this boundless transcendental happiness. So it is stated that thus meaning in this Brahma-Bhuta state, the self-controlled yogi constantly engaged in yoga practice becomes free from all material contamination. So Brahma-Bhuta in one sense is an experience of extrication from matter, the joy of being extricated from matter. So extrication from matter. Because matter is always putting us in turmoil. And therefore, when there's an experience of extrication from matter, naturally that's going to give us happiness. So therefore, this yogi has made progress till this Brahman on his journey of Ashtanga yoga process. So becomes free from all material contamination and achieves the highest stage of perfect happiness in transcendental loving service to the Lord. So again, Prabhupada is here, this Brahma Sansparsha. So here in the 20th verse, it is referred to as Brahma Sansparsha, and 27th verse is Brahma-Bhutah. In either of the case, Prabhupada is just ascending that level of attainment to a much higher level when Prabhupada is explaining the experience here. But in any case, why he is doing so, it will become very clear shortly. Okay, in 29th verse, then Krishna is saying that Sarva Bhutastham Atmanam Sarva Bhutani cha Atmani Ikshate Yoga Yuktatma Sarvatra Samadarshana. So then now what happens? The yogi's realization goes further. The yogi's realization goes further into Paramatma realization. So it is expressed as Sarva Bhutastham. Sarva Bhutastham means one who is present in every being. We cannot claim ourselves to be present in every being, right? Sarva Bhutastham Atmanam. Because this word Atma can refer to the individual soul, but the same Atma, this word can refer to the supreme soul. How do we know which one is it referring to? We know because it is prefixed by saying that Sarva Bhutastham Atmanam. So one who is present in all the beings, and that is essentially the super soul. So here the yogi's experience has moved further ahead. The yogi experiences the presence of the super soul. I wrote here Krishna again because of a reason you're going to soon see why I have written here. So when a yogi experiences the presence of the super soul in everyone and sees everything resting in that super soul, and that's what leads to equal vision. So again, in the previous verse I quoted Brahma-Bhutah Prasannatma na shochati na kankshati, this 18.55 Samaha Sarveshu Bhuteshu. So there also this equality of vision comes. Okay, that one has a vision of equality towards all beings. Why? Because whenever a yogi is looking into other beings, he sees that, oh, the same super soul is residing in everyone, and everything and everyone is resting on that super soul. So Sarva Bhutani cha Atmani. Ikshate means this is the vision. Ikshate Yoga Yukta Atma. Yoga Yukta Atma means one who is in this way engaged in the process of Ashtanga Yoga. Sarvatra Samadarshinaha. One becomes a Samadarshi. Samadarshi means one sees equally. And you can remember this Samadarshi also came in the 5th chapter, that Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavi Hastini Shunicheva Shopakecha Panditaha Samadarshinaha. That when one is endowed with proper knowledge, that Vidya and humility. So knowledge and humility, when they come together, then what happens is that Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavi Hastini, that elaboration of equal vision was made. That equality of vision is not just about equality of vision for the human beings, but it's for all species of life. Because there is the spark of the spirit soul in everyone, and there is the super soul dwelling in every species of life. Therefore, this equal vision is just not for human beings. There it was very clearly mentioned that there was a wide range of species considered, and we discussed that Brahmane Gavi Hastini Shunicheva Shwapakacha Pandita Samadarshina. In this way, the Pandita, one who has proper knowledge, is able to see everyone equally. So here also the same equal vision comes into the experience of a super soul realized Ashtanga yogi. So by dint of realizing the localized feature of the absolute truth, of the super soul, one is able to see everyone equally. So now in the 30th verse, it just goes along that same line, that yomam pashyati. Now this is the key, you can say, verse which kind of resolves that puzzle that we were having, that yomam pashyati. So Krishna here is saying, now he is referring to mam. In the 29th verse, Krishna just said that sarva bhutastham atmanam, one who is dwelling in everyone. He didn't qualify who is that. Here he's saying who? Yo mam pashyati. Mam means one who sees me. Sarvatra, everywhere. Sarvam chamai pashyati. And he sees everyone is also resting in me. Tasyaham na pranashyami, sacha na me pranashyati. So you can think of like 29th and 30th verse. 29th verse pretty much Krishna stated in terms of the super soul, and Krishna repeated the same verse pretty much, just replacing the super soul with himself. And that is why it is important to see here an establishment of equality between Krishna and the super soul. So you can see now the Ashtanga Yogi's realization has gone here. So going through Brahman realization, then Paramatma, which is a localized because the Paramatma is localizable in the heart of an individual, right? So we have given this analogy. The best way to understand these three stages of realization is by taking the analogy of the sun. So when we are realizing the presence of the sun just in terms of the heat and the light, without actually seeing the sun in the sky, just coming in contact with the light of the sun, we realize the presence of the sun. That is essentially coming in touch with the energy of the sun, right? Now, if we go out of the house and then try to see where is that energetic source from where this light energy is emanating, and then we are able to localize the presence of the sun in the sky, and that is essentially the localization. But then that is still not the complete realization, because we are seeing the sun to be really, really small, as much as our eyes can perceive. And therefore, that realization is still not complete. In order to complete that realization, one has to be able to enter into the sun globe and become familiar with the variegatedness that exists within the sun globe. And that complete realization is essentially the Bhagavan realization, where we can understand, let's say, if we stretch that analogy further, that inside the sun globe, there is the deity of the sun called Vivaswan, or the personality of sun, who is called sun god, and whose bodily emanations are generating the rays of the sun, or who is responsible for bringing forth the energy of the sun. So here is in that, you can say, along that line, we can see that this is basically the personality of Godhead. So understanding that ultimately Paramatma, this localized feature, is nothing but an expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this Brahman is nothing but the bodily rays of that Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this way, there is a gradual development of an understanding of the absolute truth. So likewise, here also Krishna led us through this realization that yo mam pashyati. And 30th verse, Krishna is saying that one who sees me in every being and sees everyone resting in me, then what happens is that I'm never lost to these people. I'm never lost to such a transcendentalist. Tasya aham na pranashyami. That I'm not lost for them. And such a me na pranashyati. And likewise, they are never lost to me. And they are always under my protection. So that's the assurance in verse number 30. And now in 31st verse, Krishna is saying now that Sarva, now he went back to that that phrase, that Sarva Bhutastham, that one who is situated in everyone. That Sarva Bhutasthitham yo mam. So now Krishna is clarifying who is that is actually situated in everyone's heart. Sarva Bhuta Sthitam yo mam. bhajati ekatvam astitaha. So in this way, one should realize that there is actually no difference between the sarva bhuta sthitam, the person who is residing as the super soul, and me, your mom, bhajati ekatvam astitaha. So in this way, one is able to see the unification or an understanding of that super soul is none other than Krishna himself. Sarvatha vartamano api sa yogi mai vartate. So that person will remain situated in me in all circumstances of life. One who has understood this complete unification between Krishna and the super soul. Please try to understand that Krishna is not unifying us with the super soul. Krishna is unifying himself with the super soul. Krishna is very clear in terms of the sequence in which the yogi is realizing. Because if there is a unification between the yogi and the super soul, then you cannot separate who is realizing, because there is a separation being made, the person who is realizing and the object of that realization. Krishna here is unifying the two objects that Krishna presented. One object is the personality who is situated in everyone's heart as a super soul. And the person, Krishna, who is speaking to Arjuna. So Krishna here is pointing out that there is no difference between the two. So one who is likewise is able to see the non-difference between Krishna and the super soul, and in this way able to realize the presence of the super soul in everyone and in everything. And in this way, everything and everyone is resting in Krishna. Then that person is never lost. And one is able to remain in that consciousness of transcendence in all circumstance of life. Okay, now in the 32nd verse, Krishna is saying the Atmo Pamyena. Atmo Pamyena means by comparing with oneself. Atma Upama. Upama is generally used as a, Upama is a synonym for simile, So we have simile, metaphor, alliteration. These are different ways in which a poet expresses, right? So simile is generally when we use the term like something, or when we are giving an analogy that this object has a resemblance with another object, so that's what we use when we say like this object. That is essentially simile. So here upama essentially upama means simile. So Krishna is saying that atma upama yena sarvatra. So in this way, one is looking into everything and everyone in relation to oneself, however way one is evaluating oneself. So Atma Aupamena Sarvatra Samam Pashyati Yo Arjuna. So this is where the idea of equal vision coming in. That one is seeing everyone just like oneself. Atma Aupamena, just like oneself. And therefore Sukham va yadiva dukkham sa yogi paramo madaha. So whether in a happy situation or in a sad situation, it doesn't matter. One is maintaining that vision of equality, because one is always looking into others just like one is looking into oneself. And one is able to see that one is situated completely dependent on the Supreme Lord. One is completely under the care and the maintenance and the protection of the Supreme Lord. Because who is after all maintaining? Is the super soul or the Krishna or the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. And everything is resting on that Supreme Personality. And this way, that is true for everyone and every being. And therefore, one is able to carry that equal vision. So this is the sequential realization of an Ashtanga yogi. So at this point, what do you think Arjuna is going to say? Okay, great. I will follow this path and have that same kind of realization. Arjuna is extremely self-honest. Arjuna is evaluating within himself that this realization, Krishna, that you're talking about having this deep control over the mind, or whether controlling the senses with the mind, controlling the mind with the senses, controlling the mind with the intelligence, and having this kind of total victory over the mind and the senses, it's just such a formidable task. And Arjuna is extremely honest at this point. So what does he say? That so this is Arjuna's presentation now in 33rd and 34th verse. After hearing all of these details, Arjuna says, Yo ayam means this, ayam means this. Yo ayam yogas tvaya proktaha. That whatever form of yoga that you have just described, okay, ayam yoga means this yogic process that you have described, tvaya prokta means as described by you, samyena madhusudana. So samyena is more or less, generally speaking, etasyaham na pashyami chanchalatvad stitim stiram. I just don't see how this is going to be of any use, almost like saying that etasyam na pashyami. I just don't see. Why? Because chanchalatvad stitim sthiram, my situation is that the mind is restless and unsteady. And therefore, what you have described to me, it appears impractical and unendurable. That's how Prabhupada has translated this particular verse, 33rd verse. And then Arjuna elaborates in the 34th verse, very, very important verse, because in the 34th verse, Arjuna brings out the characteristics of the mind because of which this process can be very, very difficult. Arjuna is saying, Chanchalam hi manha Krishna pramathi balavad dridam tasyaham nigraham mane vayur iva sudushkaram. Now, who is speaking this verse? Arjuna. Arjuna is no ordinary personality. He knows how to control the wind. Today's scientists, they have many advanced technologies in predicting weather and so on and so forth. Like sometimes they may even predict hurricane arrival, in a particular place. Sometimes they may not exactly figure out the trajectory, but more or less they can figure out through the statistical means. But even if they were able to figure out, they cannot control hurricane, right? But here Arjuna, he is such a valiant warrior. He has all the technology to even control the wind. So Arjuna therefore is placing this analogy. He's saying that mind has got these 4 characteristics. First of all, mind is chanchal. So chanchal means restless or flickering. Second, it is pramathi. Pramathi means it is agitating. Okay, pramathi, and it is not only agitating, that agitation comes with full force. It's forcible. It's forcibly agitating. It's forceful, Mind is forceful. Balavat. And on top of that, it is very obstinate. These are the 4 characteristics of the mind. And we can completely resonate with what Arjuna is saying here. But here the point is that Arjuna is far more controlled and valiant compared to us. And this Arjuna, in the previous yuga, he is rejecting this process. So this is what we have to keep in mind. And he's saying that tasya aham, because of this, to control the mind, I find it more difficult than controlling the wind. Vayur iva sudushkaram. So how can I ever achieve success with this kind of a process that you're talking about? At every step, you're talking about controlling the mind. But the mind has got these 4 dangerous characteristics. So as far as I'm concerned, I just cannot see it to be as any practical process that you have given me. So this is Krishna's response. Krishna completely agrees with Arjuna. He says that asanshayam. You see how beautiful this Bhagavad Gita is. It's just like a dialogue. It's not like you just lay down, here are the rules, you follow, and that's it. No, there is a room for discussion. Arjuna here is very, very honest. He's not just saying that, okay, you have given me the process, okay, I'm going to follow. No, Arjuna is presenting his own situation. He's saying that, okay, I find it very difficult. So this is not like, okay, you just told me and I'm just ready to follow. You have to make it easier for me. This is not good enough. So therefore, Krishna here is saying that asanshayam. Asanshayam means no doubt. Mahabaho. Mahabaho. Now this is also very, very significant name of Arjuna. Mahabaho means he is mighty armed. Arjuna is very, very strong. But strong what? Physically. As far as mind is concerned, it's almost like you can say Krishna is speaking sarcastically, that you are Mahabaho, you are so powerful, and you are saying that it's so difficult to control the mind, that even for such a powerful Arjuna, it is very difficult to control the mind. So, Asanshaya Mahabaho Mano Durnigraham Chalam. Indeed, it is very difficult to control the mind. Then Krishna is giving a very summary sort of solution in a summary form, that abhyas in a tu. So there is the word tu. Tu means he is reversing that, yes, it is difficult to control the mind, but, so this tu is very significant. So that abhyas in a tu kantya vairagyana chagrayate. It is possible by practice and detachment. That didn't completely solve though. Krishna is just saying that, okay, it's difficult to control the mind, but you just keep practicing, and have the spirit of detachment. So that's how Krishna presented. And then 36th verse is very significant. In fact, 36th verse is even more important, I would say. So this word, you put the word suitable here. It's in one sense coming from verse number 36, not so much from verse number 35. Because in 35, Krishna just says abhyasena. So this is abhyas and this is vairagya. Two things will make you successful, abhyas and vairagya. But in 36th verse, Krishna is saying that asayatmana, asayata atmana. Asayata atmana means for one whose mind is unbridled. Asayata atmana. Asayata atmana. Yogo. So for a yogi, not yogi, for asayata atmana, or for one whose mind is unbridled, yoga means this process of yoga, dushprapa itimati. It's going to be a very difficult task. Yeah, that's what Arjuna is also saying. Yes, yoga is difficult for one whose mind is uncontrolled, and that's pretty much how this chapter even started. Like in the we saw in the 5th and the 6th verse, Krishna also stated there that for one whose mind is uncontrolled, it acts as one's greatest enemy. In one sense, we are all the time moving around with our greatest enemy. What life are we expecting? What kind of lifestyle are we expecting to have? What kind of experiences we are supposed to have in this material world? Because we are always living with this greatest enemy, the uncontrolled mind. So Krishna is saying yoga is going to be very difficult for one whose mind is uncontrolled. Asayata atmana yogo dushprapa iti me mati. And then Krishna is saying that vashya atmana tu. So again, he's using the word tu here. But, so vashya atmana, how is it possible to control the mind? Vashya atmana tu yatata. Yatata is very significant words. Yatata means to strive. Yatata shakyo vaptum upayatah. So one has to strive by appropriate means. So one should strive to control the mind by the right means. So here, why this verse is significant is that the focus goes into two things. One is that one is constantly striving, and the process that one is applying is the right process. It's not that we can apply any random process and hope to be successful. Because there are so many so-called teachers in this world who are ready to offer you a formula. Okay, you're having difficulty with concentration, okay, use this formula. You're having difficulty with this, use this formula. Krishna is saying that, well, you have to first figure out whether the process is right. Upayata means the right process. It's almost like upayata is almost like an engineering term. You need to have the right engineering solution. It's not just about striving for something. You're striving to control the mind, which is a very difficult process. And therefore, you better be sure that the process is right. So therefore, one who strives by appropriate means is assured of success. And therefore, we need to now, for the rest of the this chapter, we need to move in the direction of what is the right means. So at this point, Arjuna asks another very, very important question. Because at this point, Arjuna says, okay, I don't know what you're talking about. You're talking about some process, which is upayataha, right means. I still haven't figured out. The problem still remains the same. Mind is still uncontrollable. What have I achieved? So at this point, Arjuna is thinking on the track of a failure. So he is now asking, okay, what is the destination of an unsuccessful transcendentalist? What if I fail? So Arjuna at this point, already on the mode of giving up, he is already fearing, I'm going to fail. It's almost like you are, suppose a student is studying for an exam, very, with full heart. And at the end, he ends up failing the exam. Now, he has a bunch of other friends who didn't even study for the exam, they failed. So he may think that, okay, I worked so hard, I missed out on all the good things that my friends had been doing, and I ended up failing. So what's the use? So Arjuna is thinking along that line, that for practicing this process of yoga, I'm giving up so many material enjoyment, okay? And now what if I am unsuccessful on this path? I'm neither materially successful nor spiritually successful. So this is about how do I deal with spiritual failure. It's a very important section. It's this section of the 6th chapter is such a beautiful section, and especially how Krishna answers this question. So Arjuna, the way he framed it is this way. The ayatihi means one who is an unsuccessful transcendentalist. Shraddhaya upeto. Shraddha means with full faith, like one is having faith that, okay, if I follow this process, I will be successful. With full faith. Shraddhaya upeto yoga chalita manasaha. So one is approaching the process with sincerity, with faith, but aprapya yoga sansiddham. But one is not able to somehow reach the finish line. Asansiddhi, one is not able to really achieve the ultimate success point. We discussed the successful point, how it looks like. But I was just saying, what if like I'm not able to reach the finish line? I've given up so many things. So kam gatim Krishna gachati. What would be the destination of such a transcendentalist? So what is the destination of the unsuccessful transcendentalist who in the beginning takes to the process of self-realization with faith, but who later desists due to worldly mindedness and thus does not attain the perfection in mysticism? And then Arjuna gives an analogy. Isn't it like just a cloud which separates from a cloud bank and unable to join back to another bigger cloud bank? Isn't it just lost in the sky? The kachinno ubhaya vibhrashtaha chinna brahmiva nashyati apratishto. This word is significant. That particular cloud which just got separated from the cloud bank, it does not have any more shelter. It's neither here nor there. So Mahava vimudho brahmana pati. So in this way, there is no position for such an individual. So does not such a man who is bewildered from the path of transcendence fall away from both spiritual and material success and perish like a riven cloud with no position in any sphere? You see the expression here. It's out of great concern at this point Arjuna is expressing. He's almost ready to embrace the spiritual failure, understanding this whole belligerence of the mind. Okay. And then he presents, So in the 39th verse, he is expressing that now this 39th verse is also a very beautiful expression from Arjuna, then etan me sanshayam Krishna chetum arasya asheshadaha twadanya sanshayasya cheta na hi upapadyate. This is a wonderful expression that Krishna, but for you, no one is to be found who can destroy this doubt. So please, I beg you to dispel this doubt completely. So he's expressing as a sanshaya, doubt. So in our spiritual path, our biggest obstacle that we face, is this doubt. So oftentimes, the doubts can belong to two categories. The doubt can be just a curiosity kind, or another doubt could be more at a out of concern for our own self. So curiosity kind of doubt could be, okay, what happens when one goes to the heavenly realm? Why do they have to fall down? And these are the kind of more curiosity sort of questions. But those questions are those kind of doubts which are more arising out of consideration of our own trajectory of spiritual life, is actually even further useful, because then one is trying to clear the doubt so that one can progress further on the spiritual path. So Arjuna in this particular section is no longer just in this curiosity mode. His doubt is in this mode, out of concern for his own self. So therefore, this doubt is one's greatest enemy in one sense, because if one's heart is inflicted with doubt, one cannot make progress. So one of the sources of fear and anxiety is really this uncertainty and lack of clarity. So most of the time when we are facing fear and anxiety, is because we are disconnection from the cause. Human mind works in such a way that the human mind becomes peaceful when we are able to ascertain the cause of something. If we are sort of disconnected from the cause, we just are nowhere, because we are not able to explain the situation. So most of the time, the source of fear and anxiety is actually this whole lack of clarity and disconnection from the cause. Therefore, when we come in contact with this spiritual literatures and teachers, so generally what we say is that usually the spiritual assistance is given to us by the combination of three things. There's Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. There is a triangulation of these three taking place in our life in order for us to move forward, because they kind of help us counter our doubts. And when the doubts are conquered, then what results is two things. One is the development of faith and development of hope. So in our life, if we see, we may not have resources at some point in time. We may not have people to lean on at some point in time. We may not have so many things, but if we still have hope, we can still move forward. If we still have an understanding of faith in the goal, then we can still move forward. So these are two most essential ingredients for us to become successful in anything, for that matter. And therefore here, Arjuna is placing his doubt before Krishna by saying, only you can dispel this doubt. It's a very, very sincere as well as humble appeal from Arjuna. And that's something to learn from. So Krishna's response is just so beautiful in this section. So first, Krishna exudes confidence, or not exudes, but instills confidence in Arjuna, not exudes. So what Krishna does is that he says that Partha, he is referring to Arjuna here as Partha, Partha naiveha namutra vinashastasya vidyate. So this word vinasha came before also. It's in the context of getting lost, or um, in one sense, not meeting with success. So Partha na eva, so na eva iha na amutra vinashastasya vidyate nahi kalyankrit kaschid durgatim tat gachati. So this word tata is a very loving way of putting it. So Krishna at this point is speaking these verses very affectionately. It's like tata means my dear, my friend, my dear. It's is in that tone. So Partha na eva iha. So eva is bringing out the certainty in that message. So na iha means in this life, na amutra in the next life. Vinashastasya vidyate. Krishna is saying that for a transcendentalist, there is no question of meeting with evil either in this life or in the next life. Nahi kalyankrit kaschit durgatim tat gachati. One who does good or one who is on the right path, that upayata, you can refer to that from the 36th verse. In other words, one who is striving by right means is never overcome by evil. Durgatim, this durgati, this word, durgati means degradation. So Krishna is saying that there is no question of degradation for such an individual. So this is at a summary level Krishna first presented. Either in this life or in the next life, one is ultra secure. This is the best security one can attain. Now Krishna analyzes it further. Okay. So in the 41st verse, Krishna talks about a yogi who becomes unsuccessful after a short practice. What happens to them? And the 42nd verse, Krishna talks about the plight of an unsuccessful yogi who becomes unsuccessful after a long practice. And the words that are used in these two verses are different to refer to these. So 41st verse refers to an unsuccessful yogi who becomes unsuccessful after a short time as yoga bhrashta. The prapya punya kritam loka anushitva shashwati sama shuchinam shrimatam gehe yoga bhrashto abhijayate. So Krishna is referring to yoga bhrashta who have been unsuccessful after a short practice. So just with a short practice, just imagine the amount of future benediction one is getting. That if one is unsuccessful after a short time, first thing that happens is that prapya punya kritam lokam. One ascends to the loka where the pious dwell. Where do the pious dwell? They dwell in the heavenly realm. So in other words, one goes to higher planets just with a short practice of yoga. And then, now because one cannot maintain one's life forever in the higher realm, one has to really go back to the spiritual abode. So there is a distinction between heaven and the spiritual abode. So if one goes to heaven, it is still a temporary situation. But still, the conveniences and the material prowess that one gets in the heavenly realm, it's huge, practically incomparable with the conveniences that we have in the material world. So it's a very, very high situation. So one goes to the heavenly realm, and then after spending Shashwati Sama means after spending a long, long time there. So many, many years of enjoyment in those heavenly realms, then one comes down to this earthly realm. And it's not that one is thrown into some random place, but one is given assurance of taking birth in a family of Shuchinam and Srimatam. The Shuchinam means one who are clean in their habits, so clean in their inner disposition. So Shuchinam means their slate is very clean. And Srimatam, So Srimata means, Shri means wealth. So wealthy, aristocratic families. So it's actually and. So, okay, this is and, not just one or the other. So one takes birth into the family of righteous people who are also having clean habits, and therefore one gets every opportunity to pick up from where they left off. That's the point. So if one has left off at 10% and became unsuccessful, because it's after a short time, let's say they were 10%, they were successful. So they pick up from 10%. That is the beauty. So we are going to see why I'm saying that. Krishna has still not stated that yet. Okay. Then in the 42nd verse, Krishna is talking about a yogi who has been unsuccessful after a long practice, prolonged practice. So athava means or, right? Or meaning another kind of yogi who has been practicing. Here, Krishna is referring to such an individual as yogi, not yoga bhrashta. So athava yoginam eva kule bhavati dhimatam etadhi durlabhataram loke janma yadi drisham. That so for one who becomes unsuccessful after a long practice, that's even more fortunate, that one gets born into the family of transcendental wisdom, and such a birth is considered to be really rare. In other words, one takes birth in the family of those who really care about progressing on the transcendental path. It could be in the family of devotees, it could be family of those who are ardent practitioners of yoga. And in this way, one can find that such a birth is extremely rare, and that rare birth is possible for those who are unsuccessful after a long practice. And it's interesting to note that they don't waste their time in heaven. That's an interesting point to note. They just straight away move to another favorable situation where there is every opportunity to continue further on their spiritual journey. And in the 43rd verse, so this is the progression, okay? So tatra tam buddhi sanyoga. So remember I said buddhi is a very important element, that is through which we practice our spiritual life. So tatra tam buddhi sanyogam labhate paurvadehikam yatate cha tato bhuyah sansiddhau kurunandana. There are a number of words here which are very important. One is that one is restoring one's intelligence. So buddhi sanyogam means that one is reviving one's divine consciousness, or reviving one's intelligence where one left off. And yatate means one is going to continue with that journey. So yatate cha tato bhuya is a very significant word here, which means again. In other words, one is able to come back to wherever one has left off. Sansiddhau. And in this way, one can move forward to achieve complete success. Now, one may say, what is the guarantee? How do I know that I'm surely going to, one may not choose to continue from there. And therefore, 44th verse is even more assuring. Krishna is saying there is going to be a guarantee. It's almost like guarantee, or you can say it would be highly probable, that the one would pick up from where one left off. So purva abhyasana. So the word that Krishna chooses in the 44th verse is purva abhyasena tenaeva hiyate hi avasho api saha jigyasurapi yogasya shabda brahmar ati vartate. So Krishna is here saying that first of all, one is used to abhyas, purva abhyas. Because of having practiced in the previous life, what happens is that one restores to that intelligence. And therefore, he avasha means without once even noticing, one picks up from where one left off. And jigyasu means one is actually restoring one's inquisitiveness again. So this is again coming from intelligence. Remember the word dhriti grahitaya, buddhaya, like with the help of intelligence, one is able to restore, because intelligence is where the discrimination power is. So this is where the discrimination power is, and this is where we are actually bringing our inquisitive mode. We are asking the basic question: who am I? Who is God? What is my relationship with God? If we don't ask these questions, our life becomes totally useless, because we are simply caught up by the temporary conditions of this material world. We never wake up actually, really. So therefore, Krishna is assuring that even if you fail, even if you are unsuccessful, rest assured you will pick up from where you left off because of Purva Abhyas. And I'm guaranteeing that. Okay. And the 45th verse, okay, 45th verse. Yeah, 45th verse, Krishna is talking about the rate of progress for an Ashtanga yogi. That prayatnat means to try, yata manastu yogi sanshuddha kilvishaha aneka janma sansiddhit tato aneka janma sansiddhis tato yati param gatim. So in order to achieve that param gatim, now what is the param gatim? What is the ultimate destination? So Krishna already indicated that making me the goal of life, right? So attaining Krishna is the ultimate goal. So that Krishna had already established when he was describing Ashtanga Yoga. So we should not forget that. That is what is Param Gatim. So Param Gatim is not about going to heaven. That also got settled. That one can go to heaven even when one is unsuccessful after a short duration of time. So therefore, clearly, going to heaven is not the Param Gatim. Param Gatim means attaining Krishna. So Aneka Janma Sansiddhi. So for an Ashtanga Yogi, here is another detail that Krishna is presenting. So in this life, we make some progress, you go to this life. So here we made, let's say, 1% progress. So it's not so much about 10%, 20%, 30%. It's not that much, because in Ashtanga Yogi, it's going to take many. So Aneka Janma, many years and births plus births of practice. So it is, so many births, meaning one is making 1.1%. In the next life, one is picking up from 1.1%, make it 1.2%. So it's a very slow progress. And that is the point. For an Ashtanga Yogi, it's a slow progress because prayatna, one is dependent on one's own effort. So one's own effort is what is dependent on. So one's own effort. And therefore, the progress is really slow. In fact, that is the key contrast between an Ashtanga Yogi and a Bhakti Yogi. Because one's own effort becomes integrated with Krishna's mercy when it comes to Bhakti Yoga. And therefore, this rate of progress problem that Krishna is describing here is getting resolved. And that's what is going to come through later. So Ashtanga Yogi is able to achieve success after many years of practice. But ultimately, the key reason one is able to make progress is Sansiddha Kilbisha. One has to wash off all contamination. Purifying. So two things as we discussed before. Atma Shuddha, one has to purify one's consciousness and one has to see Krishna as the goal. And that is true regardless of which yogic discipline you follow. Okay, so then finally, in the last two verses, Krishna nails it down. What is the ultimate process? What is the upaya? So far, Krishna had left Arjuna in a confused condition, because of which Arjuna was on a mode of thinking about failure. Okay, so here, this verse, 46th verse, is first bringing out the point that yoga is the key ingredient for success. Karmi, so karma yoga is better than karmi. Gyan yoga is better than gyani. Dhyan yogi is better than dhyana. We have to bring the yoga component. That's the key of this verse. So Krishna is saying, tapasvibhyo adhiko yogi. So adhiko, I'm using the greater than symbol for indicating adhiko. That a yogi is greater than a tapasvi. So tapasvibhyo adhiko yogi jnanibhyo api matadhika. Actually, this verse, if you just understand, it's just saying that tapasvibhyo adhiko yogi. A yogi is greater than a tapasvi, which means an ascetic, right? Or tapasvi, and yogi is also greater than a jnani. Okay, so empiricist. And obviously, a yogi is greater than a simple karmi. Karmibhyo cha adhikaha, a fruitive worker. So this is what the verse is saying, okay? That yogi is greater than this, yogi is greater than this, yogi is greater than this. But the why I presented this is because Srila Prabhupada mentions a very important statement in his purport. He's saying that asceticism without self-knowledge is imperfect. And empiric knowledge without surrender to the Supreme Lord is also imperfect. Therefore, we can see it in this way, that if a person is just a fruitive worker, he's just a karmi, he's just facing the regular karmic reactions, there is nothing more than that. He's just maintaining his family and just doing his job properly. But there is no element of transcendence in his life. So therefore, he's just busy working and receiving the karmic reactions. So better than a fruitive worker is one who has realized that that's not how I want to lead my life. I want to take to asceticism, which means that I want to do some austerity. But that one may take austerity, which means that one is not just bought into the simple actions and reactions of life. Therefore, one is able to free oneself to that extent. So therefore, he is better. But asceticism without self-knowledge is imperfect. Therefore, some knowledge is needed. So when there is a knowledge component added, therefore, such a person becomes an empiricist. That one understands that it's not just austerity for the sake of austerity, but actually there is a destination, there is a higher goal. But that higher goal may not be incorporated with submission to the Supreme Lord, and that also would be imperfect. And therefore, at the stage of yoga, when one is talking about yoga, one is talking about connection, as we were discussing last week. So this is what is connection to the Supreme. So when you integrate the connection to the Supreme, then that positions one in a proper state. And therefore, Krishna is saying, in all circumstances, whether you are an empiricist or an ascetic or a fruitive worker, the key point is that you have to be a yogi, which means that you are connecting with the Supreme Lord somehow. Okay, that's the point. The question is that how is one supposed to connect with the Supreme Lord? And so therefore, 47th verse that Krishna speaks is the most important verse of all the chapters taken together, covered so far, 1 through 6. It's the pinnacle point achieved so far. So Krishna is giving everything at this point, like what is the right means that Krishna just left Arjuna in that doubting state. Krishna is resolving in this particular verse. So Krishna is saying that yoginam api sarvesham mad gatina antaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam same yukta tamo mataha. So in Sanskrit, generally when we say just something, you can go that further by adding tara, which means you are making it not superlative, but imperative. And then you can make it superlative by adding tama, So here yukta, yukta tara, and yukta tama. So it is basically good, better, and best, So Krishna here is using the word yukta tama. So if you recall in the 19th verse of I believe it's the 19th verse, where 19th verse. No, 18th verse, where Krishna says that yada viniyatam chittam atmanieva avatishtate, then nispriya sarva kamebhyo yukta. Krishna used the word yukta, which means good. Okay, you're well situated. Iti uchyate tada. Here Krishna is using the term yukta tama. Okay, so what is the best process? So Krishna is saying yoginam api sarvesham. Now Krishna already stated in the previous verse, be a yogi. Question is, what kind of yogi? Yoginam api sarvesham, of all the yogis, sarvesham mad gatena antaratmana. So one whose inner self, gatena, is going to Krishna with faith. So shraddhavan bhajate. This is word shraddhavan bhajate, one who is engaging in the process of bhakti with faith. That person is considered to be the best of all yogi. So what is the striving by right means? That gets resolved here, which means that take to the process of bhakti yoga. If you want to really be successful in overcoming the power of your mind, power of your senses, you have to come to the point of engaging in bhakti. So this is the pinnacle point achieved so far. And guess what? 7 through 12, these 6 chapters, Krishna dedicates to just talking about bhakti yoga. Because Krishna had already established his point that bhakti yoga is the highest of all yoga. There's no point talking about anything else. And therefore, Bhagavad Gita is like a sandwich where the middle 6 chapters, they carry the most important part of the knowledge. So let's just summarize. So we have left off in the 5th chapter where we talked about a karma yogi, a nishkam karma yogi achieves the state of Brahman realization. Okay. And then we, in the beginning of this chapter, Krishna talked about how there is another strategy that one can employ in order to connect with Krishna. Okay. So Krishna in the previous chapter had talked about karma yoga and karma sannyasa. And Krishna said that both of them, oh, here there is a typo. This karma yoga, sorry, not this one. This one is a typo. This is the analysis. Both karma yoga, so this is synthesis, this is correct. So both synthesis and analysis is good. So for one who is in the beginning stage of the Ashtanga yoga process, they should follow karma yoga. One who is in the advanced stage, Krishna is saying they can basically take to karma sannyas, but essentially there is no difference, because after all, what does that mean? That essentially means renouncing all material desires. And we discussed that's actually renouncing all material conceptions of life. It's not about giving things, but it's about giving up of material conceptions of life. So in the Ashtanga yoga, Ashtanga yogi can span this yoga rukshu to yoga rudha stage. And therefore, one can operate in either of these two modes. In other words, karma yoga, karma sannyas can be part of the Ashtanga yoga process in this way. Okay, so now when we talk about, in order to become successful, we have to recognize that after all, I have this material body, I'm a spirit soul, but I'm covered with this material body. And right now, it's a fact that actually the material nature, which is under the control of Krishna, is actually controlling the body, which is made up of essentially both the gross body, the body made up of senses, as well as the subtle body, the mind, intelligence, ego, and so on and so forth. So when we talk about body, we're talking about both the gross body and the subtle body. But it's a fact that the soul is much on a higher situation. This arrow is signifying that there is a control that can come from the soul. Right now, we are receiving control from the material nature. We are completely obedient to the material nature. Okay. So then an Ashtanga yogi recognizes that after all, Paramatma is dwelling within everyone's heart and is also dwelling in every single thing. And therefore, to see that Paramatma, to come face to face with Paramatma is the goal of life. And therefore, in advanced stage, one tries to control the senses with the mind and control the mind with the intelligence. We discussed that. And in this way, ultimately, one wants to realize the Paramatma within the heart. Okay. So now, as far as the ascetic is concerned, so what an ascetic is doing is that he is trying to control the senses with the mind. Okay. So we discussed that ascetic is therefore better than a fruitive worker, but he may not have the knowledge of the self. And an empiricist has knowledge, and therefore the knowledge is coming from the intelligence with that discrimination power. He's trying to control the mind with the intelligence, but he may not have the knowledge of the supreme. And therefore, one has to become a yogi, because yogi means one who is controlling the intelligence with the connection with the supreme source of its existence. But that yogi may not have the supreme conception of God. So when the yogi has the supreme conception of God, then that yogi practices bhakti yoga. And therefore, bhakti yogi is the highest of all other yogis who may not have the supreme conception of God. And that bhakti yogi's realization is that ultimately Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, who is the basis for Paramatma and Brahman. And therefore, he is in the highest state of yoga. The bhakti yoga is the highest state. And therefore, one who practices by this right means, which is bhakti yoga, is therefore assured of success, and nothing is ever lost. And that's what we recognized from this section. All right. I'm really, really sorry. I went ahead, but I would like to still open up for question and answer. Um, I wanted to finish this chapter, and so I was in a little bit of a rush. Any question or comment?
Yeah, this is Preeti. So I liked few things that were mentioned in the class today, which is the source of fear and anxiety is due to uncertainty. Because people do, when they are confronted with a disease, such as say cancer,
Yes.
they are anxious and because they don't understand why they got it, for one.
Yes.
And um, so that made sense. And the question then becomes how to get rid of that anxiety and fear of what's going to happen to them, and that's where you're trying to describe this process of yogi, the hierarchy of God, intelligence, mind, and body, how they connected. So that was interesting to me.
Yes. And you saw how Krishna very wonderfully dispelled Arjuna's doubt very systematically in the last section where Arjuna was really worried. I mean, mind is so much out of control. I mean, we can relate to ourselves. I mean, it's just so practical. And Krishna explained to him that don't worry, like you are going to be eventually successful. And even if you're unsuccessful, situation is only brighter for you just because of sticking to the process. And then finally, Krishna is ending up explaining that, okay, if you want to really cut the chase, then here is the ultimate process that I'm offering you. And that is the process of Bhakti Yoga. And that's what is going to be now elaborated on in the next 6 chapters. And you will see like what detail that Krishna goes in.
Yeah, so it would be nice to, with this example that I have, to see how you could dispel their anxiety of something that happens in the material world to your body.
Sure. So as you can see, Krishna is always bringing our attention to our overall existence, So body is seen as a covering and is a facet of our temporal reality, which is kind of just bound by this very small, insignificant fraction of time. Like if you think about the journey of the soul, this particular life is not even a speck, right? It's just a very, very tiny, insignificant dot. The question is more about, yes, I have been endowed with whatever resources I'm endowed with, this particular kind of body or whatever I have been provided. How can I best utilize all these resources so that I can understand what is my real position? Who am I? And if even a tiniest bit of attention can be drawn in that direction, then we are experiencing transcendence at that point out of our material body. And it's a question of how we can sustain that understanding and that that realization. And therefore, for in this material world, it is said that that pain is inevitable, right? But suffering is optional. Because suffering is something that is coming from our own material conceptions. So if we can come out of material conceptions and really enter into spiritual conceptions, then there is no more suffering. And it's Krishna's invitation to us that don't suffer in this material world. You have an option to not suffer. You have option not to be identified with the material circumstances of life, because you are not a product of matter. You belong to the spirit. Recognize that and act on that foundation. And how exactly to act? Like, what are the practical ways to act? That's essentially the 7th chapter through 12th chapter. You will see. So many details that Krishna will present.
So it's sort of, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. No problem.
But just to follow through on this, people who are most intelligent and successful when they are confronted with a bodily disease have the most difficulty because they are always questioning why me.
Yes.
And so that's a hard one because they are so intelligent, so to say. Okay, thank you.
And the answer is given. That's the good part. And it's good that they're asking this question, why am I suffering? Because that is the entry point for spiritual life. It's just that questioning is a very good question. And it's a question plus when we embrace the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, it's a perfect combination because you have the answers also. So it's important to actually ask this question. And as you rightly pointed out, and that is the sign of an intelligence. The sign of an intelligence is to really ask or doubt, why am I feeling so secure in this material world? In one sense, you can think of our tendency is to direct the doubt towards the ultimate goal of life, and Krishna's intervention through the Bhagavad Gita is directed towards make us doubt this material world, which we are considering it to be our primary place for enjoyment, So Krishna is planting doubt in our hearts towards this material world. And in this way, he is resolving the doubts that we generally project towards him. So doubting in that sense is good, as long as it is also mixed with the sincere effort to move towards a reality. And Krishna is just going to open the doors for us to walk in. Okay, is it okay, Piti?
Yes, thank you, sir.
Okay.
It's a journey.
Okay. Thank you. Any other question or comment?
Hare Krishna, I have a. Oh.
Go ahead,
please.
Satur. Go ahead, Satur.
Okay.
We will ask Vikas.
Okay. So I have a question in the 41st verse.
41st verse, okay.
Yeah. You had shared that for a yogi who is unsuccessful after a short period of practice.
Yes.
Yeah. So in that case, like after enjoyment in the heavenly planets, the yogi returns to a family of Shuchinam and Shrimatam. And I got confused. Like you said, it's and like Shuchinam
and the translation is or, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I think when I spoke that, I was also thinking that I should actually seek a clarification. However, did I get back to you? I just would like to refer to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's translation as well, because sometimes when the transliteration is done, it can miss. But I just want to make sure. Okay.
Okay, bro, makes sense.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I myself was thinking about it. Yeah, anything else? Yeah. Vikas, do you wanted to say something?
I think for me to kind of process and understand it, it's like it's the whole process of reincarnation. You do what you can in this life, and then you do more in the following life, and you do more in the subsequent life. So you just kind of keep going through these processes. So even this whole notion of why are you confronted with a disease right now? It's actually the end of one, but the beginning of another. So it's to kind of help put that in perspective, and it's our own infirmity, and lack of knowledge, which makes this seem as the entire spectrum, as opposed to being a very finite element of the entire spectrum.
Yeah, very well put. Very nicely put.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
So,
very nice expression.
Thank you. So it's very good. I'm glad I was able to join again after a couple of weeks I missed. I apologize.
Yeah, please do catch up from the recording, because we had discussed a lot of points there in preparation to build up to this point.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.